Cool, thank you. Just to start with, I'm going to apologise. There might be a bit of coughing and spluttering. I'm not feeling my best today, but we'll see how it goes, and hopefully it'll go on. So, strangely, my first slide won't make any sense now, as I was just chatting about in the break, because yesterday, if you'd have seen me, I had a massive scab on my nose and a big cut on my head, and I wanted to put a bit of an explanation behind that to explain that I haven't been fighting all weekend and things like that. So, just as completely unrelated to digital, basically, it's if, like me, the furthest you've run in the last year is 10K, and I'm not talking about 10K as a single session, I'm talking about 10K as a total of the last 10 months, the last thing that you want to do when you're drunk with a couple of mates is decide that what you're going to do is a Tough Mudder next weekend. Didn't go well, shall we say, hence the bleeding. And just as a little bit of health and safety, if you see an obstacle like this, and there's a big queue behind it, everyone's taking the time going through really slowly, they're probably doing it for a reason. Don't be like me and think the best solution is to run it at speed and dive through it, because you end up with a lot of blood everywhere, and yeah, it's not the best option. But anyway, it doesn't really make any sense anymore, because I'm not scabbed up, but we'll pretend it does and just move on. So yeah, as John introduced me, I'm head of earned media at JD Williams Group, so looking after SEO, social and content. I'm not going to go into this because there's loads of words and it's not very interesting, it's just about my history. But basically I've been working in digital for about 11, 12 years now, a lot of the time at agency side, and I decided to switch over to client side just over a year ago, maybe 18 months ago, to see what that experience was and learn a lot more from it. And brand themselves, I'm assuming some, hopefully, of you have heard of us, but we're a fashion brand that have been going for about 140 years. Mainly or historically a catalogue business, obviously, because the internet wasn't around 140 years ago. But we've had websites since 1992, and we've gone through a lot of change over that time, trying to change everything. So we've got about at the minute 30 odd brands, all on different websites, and more of about 60% of our revenue comes from digital. So we've gone through a lot of growth over that time. And obviously with a lot of growth, we've also had to change our approach a lot, and we've become, it's been difficult, I would say, dealing with a lot of old processes. I've skipped on ahead, by the way, this has nothing to do with what I'm talking about at the minute. I'll go back. Yeah, as we've had a lot of changes to our approaches, and it's been quite difficult, and I don't think by any means we're in the right place, and we've got a lot further to go, but having a lot of our revenue come through digital now is definitely the route that everyone's focusing on a lot more. So as John said, my talk is about Hamstrung SEO, so a bit of background to this talk really. So as I said, I've been at JD Williams for about 18 months now. And prior to me coming in, there was, well, hopefully I'll be there for a while, no longer, but prior to me coming in, there was a bit of a turnover with the SEO teams there, and a bit because of that, there was a lack of trust, and a lot of trust got broken, and people weren't sure what was going on and things like that. So I wanted to basically share my experience over the last 18 months of how we've tried to deal with that and some of the obstacles we've come up against. So we've all been there, especially those of you that have got the age of our websites have got, so 140 years. We built our first website our first e-commerce website in 1992. We're still running the same platform we were running in 1992. We've got, our websites are actually more sticking plasters than they are website now, I think. We've got about 6 CMSs bolted together, all customized. We've ripped up all the core code, so we can't update any of them anymore. It's a bit of a nightmare. And then obviously we're going through, thankfully everyone's recognised that, so we're going through a big website replatforming at the minute, which has taken about a year, and it's looking like it's going to be another year in the future until we're actually done with it, which is really good, really looking forward to being in a really strong position. But obviously with that comes the difficulties of nobody actually wants to update our current websites, so anything that we've got wrong with our current websites from a technical perspective, it's a really massive battle to try and actually get anything built and anything updated. And then content. Anyone that's got an e-commerce site or runs an e-commerce site, if you aren't having content issues, my hat's off to you, because we've got a lot of them. As I said, we've got about 30 websites. Over those, we've got about 120,000 products. Each of those products has color and size variations. There's one description across every color, every size, every website, which causes some issues from an SEO point of view, as I'm sure you can imagine. And then equally, on top of that, not just our websites, the same product and same copy gets distributed to all our feeds. So all of our affiliates get the same copy. eBay and Amazon get the same copy, which is fun when you're trying to compete against Amazon for your own products. Yeah, and just as a side note, if anyone's considering looking and launching on Amazon, make sure you read their contracts very carefully, because yeah, if you don't try and make alterations to their contract, basically you won't be able to breathe without asking their permission. So yeah, we've all been there really, where we're really stuck, we're really hamstrung in the ability to make changes. We're all in a very difficult position, and building that trust and building that ability to take things on and move things forward is really difficult. But as I've said multiple times now, really for me, the main issue, oh no, different slide. I've just skipped this bit, but I'll go back to it. Ignore everything I was just saying. Yeah, I remember back when I was agency side, and probably more junior agency side, I used to sit there after doing a technical audit and delivering it to people, and I'm just like, I don't understand why you can't do it. It's just obvious. You need to sort out your page titles, you need to sort out your code, you need to do this, you need to do that. It's just obvious. I've given you everything you need to do, and I think that's probably the biggest learning point I've had from moving from agency to client side. Is it's just been a massive eye-opener for me in terms of the impact and the roots. And I suppose going straight into JD Williams, which is quite a large client as a fast-moving client side, there's a lot of politics and a lot of hoops to jump through there. I ran this through with my internal team the other day at work, and one of the guys turned around and said, this is how he still feels, even though he's at client side, so probably some work we need to do there, but oh gosh, sorry. Yeah, so this is the slide I was expecting before. A lot of the issues, as I've hinted at before, for me really stem from trust, and this is a Dilbert comic, and it is not the only one in here, so I apologise if that is. But for those of you that can't read this, to summarise it, basically, it's Dilbert going up to his manager and saying employees that have the most trust perform the best, and ultimately the manager turns around and says, when you're actually performing, I'll trust you. And I think, although that is a comic and things like this, I think it's very true. And it's a situation that I found a lot, especially with the background that I described when I first started there, where there's been a lot of turnover of a digital team, and as such there's been a lot of burnt bridges around all of that kind of stuff. And I suppose people's commitment and wanting to allow you to make those changes and understanding why you need to make them. I suppose for me, a lot of it comes down to internal knowledge, and really the unknown is scary, and I think knowledge-based trust is really important, and I think that's for me how most of our progression has come in the last 18 months and how we've progressed things. So I'm going to read this from a slide because I stole these from somebody else, and I don't want to get it wrong because I think it's approached really quickly. So knowledge-based trust, it relies on information rather than fear, and it's based on the knowledge that one person has over another. And I think the key point in this is people feel that predictability of behaviour is a stronger trust driver than contracts and legal arrangements. And I think that's really interesting, and I think it's really obvious when you think about it. If you are consistently proving your worth and showing that when you try and push things through, you're actually returning back what you say you're going to return back, it's just basic, but people are going to start trusting you more. As soon as that trust develops and people are listening to you a lot more, it then makes everything so much easier. But I don't think it stops at building that trust, because once you've gained the trust, you've got to work even harder to try and keep it, because if you've built that up and you've thrown it away, you might as well just walk away because you can't start it again. I'm sure you can, but the amount of pain you'll have to go through is so much hard. So here's the other Dilbert comic that I promised, which amuses me a little bit, and I think it ties really tightly into communication, which is probably the other key point around trust, which is realistically, whether you're agency or client side, I can't remember who did it, but I saw a presentation a few weeks ago, and the one line I took from it basically was, it doesn't matter how much work you're doing, if you are not telling people what you are doing and not constantly keeping them in the loop, you might as well not be doing anything, because if you're not constantly talking to them, they'll just forget you exist. And that doesn't mean formalized reports, it doesn't mean big, deep sessions, it might just be a case of sending round on a weekly basis, these are the tasks we've up to, this is this. It might be running Basecamp or the like to just so that anyone can log in at any time and see that things are progressing. But as I said, if you're not telling people that things are progressing, you might as well not be progressing anyway, because no one will think you are. So how do you do it? I've called this the 5 pillars of success for me, and this text may be too small for you to read, and whether you believe it or not, and whether this is the approach you would take or not, I think it varies a lot for everyone, but this is what's worked for me, I suppose, and it's around processes, technology, integration, celebration, and communication. So just as a caveat to this, some people might recognize these slides because I ran out of ideas for images, so I went over Click's website and stole loads of their process images. So none of these are mine, but I'm sure they won't mind too much. Process. I think a lot of people, I won't say scared of process, but I'm not sure if that's the right way to put it. I think even myself, I try and shy away from process a lot, because it feels like you're going to tie yourself down an individual route, and as soon as you still develop a process, it's really, it reduces the flexibility, I suppose, of what you can actually do. But if, I suppose, process here, in my eyes, isn't a set process that you follow, it's almost a starting point and a resolution with a few points that you need to make sure you consider along the way rather than a specific route. I don't think it really matters how you accomplish something, but making sure you have a checklist so that when you are trying to accomplish something, whether it be a website migration, whether it be page optimization, that you always make sure you complete every single step all the way is really important. If you are consistently doing something very differently all the time, I think that doesn't build the trust, because people never know what to expect. And as soon as you have built that trust, then having processes built up that they follow and people know that you are following enables you to drive that confidence that you haven't missed anything and you haven't forgotten anything. And ultimately, people will just leave you alone a lot more, which is, well, it's what I want, but a lot of people don't feel the same, I suppose. Technology. I think technology is a really key one, and I think it was interesting going back to what Alan was saying earlier around agencies having a lot more free access to technology. But I think it's really important for clients as well, especially if you've got an in-house team. I mean, we use agencies as well, but we've argued really, really hard to ensure that we've got the ability to run all our tracking, run all our reporting, everything internally as well as externally. And I suppose in a roundabout way, without having the technology there, it destroys the rest of these points. If you can't prove that what you are doing is working, you might as well not bother. And I suppose the right technology varies so much depending on what stage you're at. And I'll go on to some examples of that in a little bit, because I think it's really interesting the fact that Alan again was saying earlier that people need to stop focusing on rankings, they need to stop focusing on things like that. It's all about your sales, it's all about your bottom line and things like that. And I agree with that for most companies, but I think there's isolated cases where that just isn't possible, at which point we all know from an SEO point of view, ultimately, yes, we are trying to drive sales, but if we break that down earlier and earlier and earlier, the easiest point to see progression is to see ranking progression. That's obviously going to change because rankings are going to disappear, and probably very shortly, no one is going to be able to do rank checking anymore. So if you are doing that already, you probably need to find a different way to report. But looking at traffic and revenue and things, depending on the stage at your site's at, potentially is not the right way to do it, especially with some of the issues that we've had. So as I said, we're very restricted on the amount of changes we can do. Therefore, we know that everything we are doing is making very minimal changes, and ultimately with the amount of traffic and revenue we're driving, it's going to be a blip on the radar, absolutely anything we do. But I think, as I said, my last 18 months has been around trying to develop this trust, and with developing the trust, it's all about showing cases and examples of progression, no matter how small and how slight that is. My next one I've got is, I called it integration on the other slide, I've changed it. Joined up thinking. And really, for me, this is multiple routes of approaching things. And I think the simplest route is just making sure you're around when people are speaking about things, making sure you're involved in the wider campaigns, making sure there's SEO people there, you're feeding in, you're adding value, you're understanding what everyone else's goals are, and trying to help them, but also obviously attaining your own performance. But I think more importantly for me comes back to this communication side. So a lot of the stuff that we're doing internally at the minute is we're trying to build ambassador teams. So we're trying to take in a individual from every single department in our business and work with them to build an internal specialist within a team. Obviously, they're never going to know as much as the marketing team and the digital team and the SEO team, but having someone that is a go-to person in each team is really important. And I think especially when you're working with larger businesses, that's such a requirement, because there's so many things you can possibly do. If you can get everyone working towards the same route, everyone understands what you're doing, why they're doing it, how your job can help them and how they can help you, and ultimately it drives revenue, which is what everybody wants. It pretty much means if you work it in the right way that everyone will just start doing your job for you, which would be really nice, and I'm sure we'd all appreciate that if all of our product buyers are writing SEO optimized content from the start and we don't need to bother doing anything and we can just kick back and see the revenue roll in. It'd be absolutely amazing. Celebrating wins. As I mentioned before, I think tying into technology and reporting, it's really interesting looking at this, and especially from building trust point of view and working with the ambassadors. What we do a lot of the time at JD Williams now is we are trying to use our ambassadors to take on a project that will benefit an individual person and build it through as a case study with them, and then displaying those results back to everybody else, no matter how small it is. Again, just making sure we're constantly communicating and showing people the impact of that. Using a tiny little example, which drove absolutely no revenue. So in some ways you could say it was a failure. But we had a football shirts page on one of our websites that my SEO manager had a look at, and he worked with some of the e-commerce guys to rewrite all the copy on the football shirts category page, and within a week they saw rankings jumping up from, and I say jumping up, this was maybe about 10 keywords we were looking at as a tiny little test. They saw rankings jumping up from like 80 to position 20s, things like that. Again, absolutely nowhere, and I suppose this is why I was saying it's really important to consider the technology, as Alan was saying. Although everyone wants to drive your revenue and your traffic and your sales, when you're taking little case studies like that and we're jumping up from position 80 to position 20, we're not going to be getting any traffic, we're not going to be getting any sales from that still, but it doesn't mean it was a failure, it still means it was success. And it's still enabling us to build these tiny little cases, tiny little tests, and builds everyone's confidence in us so that when we try and do something, they believe us. So then when we've built enough of these up and people start trusting us, we can start scaling them and start making changes that are actually going to make some impact and be allowed a lot more flexibility with everything we're doing. And as I said, communication really. Communication is, as well, I think I pretty much covered it all before. When the last time I put this comic up, if you're not talking to everyone and you are going away and you're just doing stuff on your own, yeah, fair enough, you might see really great results. But if you are not telling anyone and constantly updating everyone, you might as well not be doing it because just no one cares and everyone's just going to forget you there. So my last slide, which is really, really cheesy, and I hate it, so I apologize in advance, because the more times I see it, the more times I just want to gouge my eyes out. But it's this slide, so there's no such thing as failure. And obviously there is. If you're going to make a change to a site and you're going to lose yourself millions of pounds, yes, someone's probably going to want to have a word with you, and you may not be in that business for very long. But I think it ties in really closely to that communication.
Cool. Thanks, Rob.
Cheers.
Thanks very much.
You.
Thanks for coming and doing your bit.